Alright, it's September 2nd, 1988, and we have with us Jack Friedman. What's your name?
Jack Friedman.
And where were you born?
I was born in Celle, West Germany.
What part of West Germany?
Celle is the name of the town.
How do you spell that?
Cella.
And when were you born?
1947.
Well, what day?
August 17th.
August 17th, 1947. And what's your permanent address?
My permanent address is 18151 Northeast 31st Court, North Miami Beach, Maryland.
As you know, I'm doing a book called Addict, and I'm photographing 50 people or more, and I'll have photograph I just put on one page, and then on the other page it's going to be like your rap, your life story, or what you think is important about you and what happened in your life and your spiritual path today. Basically your message and hope, whatever you want to talk about. Don't worry about what you say, it's going to be edited, and you should just feel relaxed and free to talk about whatever you want, and I'll just gather information from what you say on the tape and put it next to your page. Basically a self-portrait of myself, all these people I photographed and then their story, because they're all pretty much the same.
You just need to get comfortable with it for a second. The concept of talking.
You got 90 minutes to talk if you want, 15 minutes. It's real casual, real simple. It's an art book, you know, you can say fuck shit. You know, it's whatever you want, man. You got 2 years today, that's real important.
Yeah, today's 2 years. 2 years of recovery. I came into this into the process of recovery right through the back door. You know, I was dragged into a hospital and deposited there by my family, and it wasn't really about looking for help or anything else. I always enjoyed using drugs. When I started, I didn't realize exactly what I was doing. I was like, I came up in the 60s, and I was a hippie, and I ran around, and I went back and forth between New York and California, took a lot of LSD and smoked pot and stuff like that. And I guess, you know, they were right. We used to laugh in those days all the time, and they'd tell you if you start smoking pot, you wind up shooting heroin. Turned out in my case they were absolutely right. That's exactly what happened. It took a little bit. Didn't quite see the way it was going to go. What happened to me, I'm a child of immigrants. We come over in 1951. We came over from Germany. My parents were survivors of the Holocaust in Europe. They were Jews who were in concentration camps. And I kind of grew up feeling that the world was a real insecure place, you know, for a real good reason, and isolated also just with my family. We weren't real big on trusting people, and that's my background. That's where I come from. There was it was always pointed out to me that I was different from the people around that I lived with. I was real, you know, I was different in some way, and I always felt that. I felt real isolated from people, and I never really felt a part of anything in this life. I really never did. I always felt like I had been, you know, like everybody else knew something. When I was a kid, I always felt that everybody knew something, what was going on except me. And I just didn't know. You know, they didn't tell me I was absent that day or whatever. And that's pretty much the way it went. I had a lot of fear. I was always real fearful about things happening to me and so on. I was really basically only secure when I was hanging out by myself. Kind of a boy and his dog kind of bullshit. That's what I did. And we moved down to New York City, to the Bronx, when I was 13 years old. I went to high school in Manhattan, right near East Village, near Washington Square Park. And my eyes started to get open a little bit. I was real naive, real innocent kid, and I went away to college, and I had a real straight upbringing. I was taught that hard work was a good thing, and that to be moral and not to be not to be too into myself, and try to be a decent type of person. That's, my parents were pretty okay role models in that way. They were emotional disasters, but that's another story. And somehow none of that took at all. None of that took even a little bit. And as soon as I got away from home, I just wanted to have some fun. I was drinking and smoking pot within the first day that I left. And that was my progression. That was my road. As soon as I started to use that way, I felt real comfortable. I found a bunch of guys to hang with. And they were doing the same things. I was accepted, and I didn't have to tell them about who I was and where I came from and the shame I felt growing up and all of that. I could just drop all of that and just get high and be a wild man. And that's what I did. And I started dropping in and out of school. I've always been a good student type of thing. It took me 7 years. I finally got through college, just the bare minimum. A lot of that because I wanted different times to avoid the draft or, get money or whatever. My reasons for staying were real suspect. I never realized what was going on with me. I always maintained for years and years, even from that point, that I was getting high just because I enjoyed doing it. That's what I enjoyed doing, and that was my motivation, supposedly. And it was, a lot of it was sexual too. That's, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That was the way things were, and I bought right into that. And around 1969, that started to change. 1969, 1970. I started to do what I swore I never would do, even though I was, getting high on all types of things. I stuck a needle in my arm. I thought I'd never do that. And when it was offered to me, I probably didn't even hesitate for a heartbeat. And I did that. And this girl that I was with turned me on to heroin. And that became the focus of my life for the next few years. And changed me for the rest of my life, I guess. From that point on, I pretty much dropped everything else, and whatever drug I was using always became the center of my life. It wasn't until I saw NA literature that I understood what that was. Using and finding ways and means to get more, and that became my whole life. That was my life. And, I always was sort of what I call a semi-functional type of addict. That I worked. I had a job. I had a house. I didn't live in the street unless I chose to, which at various times I did, but not after I started shooting dope. And I moved back to New York City, and I got, a pretty much regular job. I worked for a construction company, and I was a super. I got the job, of course, because my dad was property owner. The only difference was that I carried a syringe with me all the time, and I kept popping into bathrooms to dope, 4 or 5 times a day, whatever it was. And sometimes I had to take long lunch hours because I had to go down to the Bronx and cop. And I still maintained that I was okay, that I did that, just because I liked to. Some people drank, and I shot dope, and I didn't see that there would be any. Why one would be any worse than the other. As it turns out, once I got into the program, that's exactly what I was told, that one is pretty much like the other, but I wasn't looking at it that way in those years. Eventually I got into trouble. I started embezzling money from the company. I just plain ran out of money to continue doing what I was doing. And I had to look at the fact that I was an addict. I don't think I ever used that word in those years, but I knew something was real wrong. And I got sick real easy. So I always had to have dope. I was either in withdrawal or nodding. I lived a lot of years like that. So I got onto a methadone program for the first time. And literally walked in there screaming with convulsions before I would go in for help. It was such a humiliating experience for me. And they went in and they gave me methadone, and it took the pain away. And I had a new drug. Eventually they detoxed me that first time off of methadone, and I had tried to stop shooting dope a lot of times in the years I was doing it. I ran around in some really horrible areas. Where else are you going to get dope from? I hung out in Harlem. Of course, it was a little different. I drove my XKE down to Harlem with the top down and parked it by the projects like it was fucking normal to do, and just walked in and copped. And nobody ever fucked with me. In all those years that I was running in the South Bronx, Fox Street, Simpson Street, Harlem, Lenox Avenue, all of those places, nobody ever messed with me. The police stopped me one time in the Bronx in all those years, and they didn't do anything. And nobody ever threatened me. Nothing. It was incredible. And I really thought I was a badass, and I really am not, and I never was. I don't know what I would have done if I had a problem. I would have bled. That's what I would have done. But I just didn't. Just like I was supposed to. I just went like I was supposed to. And I was shaking, but I had to get my dope. That's the way it was. Anyway, at this point, I decided my problem was that I'm a dope addict, a heroin addict. That's my problem. Addicted to heroin. And I figured that if I stopped shooting heroin, my life would be okay, get better. So I used this methadone for a while, and I got off of that. And I got off it because, I got jammed up. I ran out of money. My family confronted me. There's a lot of horrible shit going on. And that's the reason why. Not because I wanted to stop, but I stopped. However I did it, I stopped. And I was okay for a while. And then this would be my pattern. I would get off a drug, and I'd be okay, and things would get better for a while. And then I'd think I was okay, and I'd celebrate by getting high, and I'd get back into that vicious cycle. And it went on for years, and I'm not really going to go through all of it. It's not that important. What I've stated is pretty much my pattern. I went on through this same pattern. I repeated the same thing with methadone a lot of times, and then with coke, and all its different manifestations. And, I kept hitting bottoms and recouping a little bit, and then hitting worse bottoms. Finally, about 5 years ago, I was pretty much at the end of my rope. I was taking a humongous dose of methadone every day. I was on a clinic. I was buying 2 extra bottles a day because I knew they weren't going to give me enough. And I was smoking base that I was making all day long, and I was taking pills. And I was just a wreck. My teeth rotted out of my head. I was fat and bloated. I was a mess. I wrecked my cars 5 times. I fell asleep and just drove off the road. Nothing ever happened to me, of course, as far as physically. I had no scratches or nothing on me. But I was real tired, and I felt real crazy. I felt real sick. And I didn't know what had happened in my life. At that time, I was already 36 years old, and I felt like my life had just passed. And I had a couple women that I really loved and that I had cast aside along the way because I just couldn't keep it together. Not for any reason whatsoever. I just couldn't keep it together. I just told them to go away. I couldn't handle emotions at all. It was what it was, but I didn't know that. And I was real down. I felt real down. My life was just falling apart, and I locked myself in my apartment for about 3 weeks, and I just kicked. And I crawled on the floor, and I sweat, and I stank. I moaned and groaned. It was just pathetic. But I did it. I just wouldn't come out of that apartment until I didn't need to shoot dope or go to the clinic. And it was horrible. It was really horrible. And I spent the next couple of years rebuilding my life, so I thought. I hadn't found recovery yet. I hadn't found NA at all. What I had found was that a profound fear of what I had gone through. And not really any understanding. But over the next couple of years, I stayed away from drugs. I even didn't drink most of the time, and I didn't perceive alcohol as a drug at that time. But I was real scared, and I just stayed away from everything. I lived a real isolated type of life. I started to get my health back together. I went to a gym. I dropped some of the bloated weight that I'd picked up. I got another girlfriend, and we spent a lot of time with each other. She's an addict. She's still active today. I don't see her anymore, but we spent 4 years together from that point. And my life did start to get better. I started to get my health back. I started to be able to talk to my family a little bit. I was back at work in my business. Things started to get better. And I started to get some pride in myself from that. I thought I did something. And all my friends were still using, and they never stopped, and I did. I started to feel a little cocky, believe it or not. I didn't learn a lesson from all of those years. And I figured I was okay now. I had licked it. I learned how to overcome the need to do drugs. I had done it. And I got sloppy. I didn't pay attention. And after about 3 years of staying away from everything, the urge to use just came up. That obsession came up one day. I don't remember what triggered it. It just came back, from out of nowhere, like it hadn't been around at all. And I had a little back spasm one day. I had back problems from time to time. And I went to a doctor, and he said, I'll give you a script for Percodan. And I had taken thousands of Percodan in my life. I knew perfectly well what they were. And here it was, 3 years after I had hit that bottom. I said, sure. And I took them, and it triggered me all over again. And I lasted about a year, at the end of which I was eating 50, 60 Percodans a day. Which probably wasn't that much compared to what I was doing when I was shooting dope, but it's enough to kill probably an average person. And I was just a wreck, and it was much worse than it had ever been. And it happened much quicker and over much less drugs. And I didn't know what to do. I just didn't know. I was lost. I didn't know what had happened. I couldn't believe that it happened to me again. And of course, I'd done the same thing and expected different results. I just didn't see it that way. And from that, one day I got the obsession to smoke some bass again, which I hadn't done in 3 or 4 years. And I did that, and from that point I lasted 7 or 8 days. At the end of the 7 or 8 days, I was running around in front of the building that I was living with a loaded .45, firing it at people. But those people existed only in my imagination. I was hallucinating. So I fired at them, and the police came and they took my gun, but I knew them. I knew the police from my business, and they never arrested me. Once again, nothing really happened to me. But I was totally out of control and pretty near psychotic. And I was ready to quit. I really was ready to quit life. I was just ready to quit. And my sister, who I'm real close to through all the years, kept an eye on me. And my girlfriend called her one day and just said, you got to come and get him. He's gone. He's out of control. And they kind of waited for a moment when I was lucid, and they all came up to my house one day. My sister and my brother-in-law was a big guy, about 250-pound guy. And they more or less, coerced me to come along with them. I didn't have any fight left in me. They took my car keys and my wallet and shit. It was all right. I had managed to stash a little coke and stuff in my pockets, and I knew where I had some money, so I wasn't worried about it. And I went down to their house, and I snuck some coke in with me, and I cooked it up at night. And I sat up all night and smoked it. Fell asleep for an hour or two and woke up in convulsions. And that was it. That was exactly 2 years ago today that I woke up in convulsions in my sister's house. And they said, she said, well, I don't know what to do with you. I got to take you to a hospital. And I was okay with that. I figured she'd take me to an emergency room and I'd get a shot of morphine or something. I'd be back out and, try to get this thing together. And what she did was she dumped me in a treatment center. And I needed all kind of medication. A couple days later, when I finally kind of came to and got out of bed, I looked around at where I was. I was real ashamed. I was 39 years old when I wound up there. I had a lot of opportunities in my life to accomplish things. and had always been told that I had a lot of talent, a lot of intelligence. And I wound up in fucking treatment center. I didn't even know really what a treatment center was. I just knew that I had lost any vestige of having control over my life. And while I was laying in that bed that first couple of days, one of the guys who worked there, who was an NA, he came over to me and he asked me if I'd had enough. And it was a perfect question. He didn't even wait for an answer, but it was the right question to ask. They explained to me about being powerless and unmanageable. They showed me the first step. And that really, I was real sick that day. I was real physically sick, and I was real depressed and real ashamed. Shame more than anything else. And that first step, when I heard that, despite myself, that triggered a little bit of hope. I get goosebumps just thinking. That triggered a little bit of hope for me. A little bit that I didn't even know still existed anywhere. Because it was such a perfect shorthand for what had happened to me. You know, I couldn't explain everything. I didn't know how I got to that point. I never understood why things worked out for me the way they did. How I seemed to turn everything into shit, and yet I always survived, and I always got better, and I always managed to get over. I didn't understand that there was a power working in my life, but I saw that first step, and it told me I was powerless over my addiction, and that my life had become unmanageable. And it made such perfect sense to me. I mean, right then, it was like a revelation to me. And, outwardly, I was still in a lot of denial, and I was telling people, listen, there's not that much wrong with me. I got some bad drugs. Things I just got a little out of control. Outwardly, I was still in a lot of denial, trying to save face, really, although, I looked like a pile of shit. I felt worse, and I was still trying to pretend I was okay. But inwardly, that was the beginning of my surrender. I knew that my ass had been solidly kicked. And they kept me there 6 weeks, and I don't know really. I feel I was fortunate. I see a lot of people go through treatment and just go out and go right back to their old way of life. In a lot of places, they do things that I don't necessarily agree with, but that was just what I needed to get. And what I got was a little education. I got detoxed again, which I was incapable of doing anymore by myself. I was just too tired to detox myself again. I could not. I knew I wouldn't do it. I would die first. I would never go through that pain of withdrawal again, ever. I just couldn't take it one more time. And they did that for me, and they did it real well. The doctors knew what they were doing. And they introduced me to recovery. They had a couple of different fellowships that would come in there, but I heard, they let me go to some NA meetings. And, I was real suspicious of these people, real suspicious. I mean, what the fuck they wanted, what they were there for, what was in it for them, But there was something about what they said and the way they said it that really got me right away. I fell asleep through one of the early meetings. I was there, and I couldn't concentrate that well. My brains were pretty scrambled, but there was still something about it that wanted me to keep coming back. I didn't want to go back to my other way of life. And these people, their stories sounded like they made sense to me. They sounded like they knew what they were talking about, where they had been, and they were okay. They were kind of happy, and it wasn't, they weren't desperate. Everything wasn't a big fucking deal to them like it was to me at that point. So I stuck around. I got out of treatment, and there's an NA room right near my house, right near where I live, where there are meetings all day and every night. And I just started going to meetings. They told me, go to meetings and you'll stay clean. And I just got out of that hospital and started going to 2-3 meetings every day. The second day I was going to meetings out of the hospital, I ran into a guy I used to do coke with. He used to live on my block. I used to buy from him. And this guy was a fucking animal. The last time I had seen him, while I was using, I had wrecked a car, and they took me to the hospital. I was had a little cut, and I was all bloody, and I had blood all over my clothes, but I wasn't really hurt. It was just little glass cuts. And I took a cab to this guy's house, and I just walked in all bloody and wild-eyed and tried to cop him, and he threw me out of his house because he was scared the police were right behind me or whatever. Anyway, I didn't figure ever that this guy would ever still be alive. He had over 2 years clean at that point. He kind of grabbed me and dragged me into the fellowship, and he's my sponsor in NA today. Has been since that, pretty much that time. And he guided me through the steps, told me to keep, told me what to do to a certain extent. And those first few months, I just grabbed onto him, and he dragged me into recovery. He told me just go to meetings every day, and get with newcomers, and just share what's going on, and work the steps. That's what he told me. You got to work on steps. We did it as fast as I was capable of, to the best of my ability. That's what he told me to do right from the start. He stressed that. When I was about 3-4 months clean, I wrote my 4th step. I wrote that 4th step. It was like, not so much. It wasn't so much what I wrote, but the process of that 4th step. All of a sudden, I walked into that same meeting room that I'd been going to for those few months, and I just knew I belonged there completely. I just felt so comfortable there. I hadn't felt that comfortable any place in my life. And I just got into it. I'd worked the 2nd and 3rd step with him before that, obviously, and that was amazing to me that I was able to even admit to myself that all these years I believed in a God, and I just didn't like the job he was doing, basically. I always thought of myself as not believing in God, but that never really was the case. It wasn't hip in my way of thinking to believe in God. I had a real yearning for some kind of spiritual life, but that disappeared about the time I started shooting dope. And I kept that real buried. It wasn't an area that I really had anything to say about. I was bitter about a lot of things in my past and so on. And I chose to blame God. I was denying his existence and blaming him at the same time. It was just a matter of being a little honest with myself. Looking at it. I realized I always thought of myself, I always figured really that God wasn't doing the job that I'd like him to do. It wasn't so much I didn't believe in him. And I was able to do a 2nd and 3rd step. And that's how I was able to do the 4th. I felt like I was in the fellowship. And I shared that with my sponsor in the 5th step. And then, I figured, well, that's pretty much what I needed to do. And then I was first told what I needed to do. That this was about change, total change of personality, total change in the way I saw the world. I was taught about something about the 6th and the 6th step and the 7th step, about taking responsibility, about looking at the fact that I had defects of character that caused me to act certain ways, and that even though I still had these defects, I didn't need to act on them all the time. I needed to start working on that. And I was not real okay with it. I didn't come into the fellowship to look at my defects. I came in because I didn't want to hurt like that. I couldn't stay alive anymore using it. But gradually I came to understand that's what I needed to do. And I still work on those steps on a daily basis, to the best of my ability. Try not to act on my defects as much as possible. That's the way I work those steps. Try not to act. And if something gets real out of hand, I need to write on it. I'll do that, although I'm not a real active writer. I became real proud of my association with the fellowship. Not so much about myself, what I was accomplishing. It just became a source of joy, a real joy in my life. I had a lot of friends in the fellowship that I loved dearly in a short period of time, and people that I really related to. I get along with people. I have an ability to get along with people. I had it even when I was using. It's just that I was real arrogant, and I disliked most people just because I had to make myself either feel superior to them, or I had to feel inferior to them. And I guess I still do that to some extent, but these people really made me feel welcome. People happy to see me. And continued some more, work on my steps. I wrote an 8-step list. I started to make some of those amends. I take an inventory of myself every day. Not every day. A lot of days. I do some things on the 11th step to try to improve my consciousness with my higher power, conscious contact with my higher power. I do a lot of 12 steps every day. Every day I do something in this fellowship. And it's just amazing to me, just natural. It just became a natural thing. It's not even a question really. It's not a day goes by that I don't have some contact with recovery. It's the center of my life. And if I happen for one reason or another not to see anybody in recovery, I pray every day and I read my literature a lot of the days. It's just the center of my life. I'm real okay with it. I love it. I have a peace of mind that I never had in my life. And I've had more money at different times in my life than I have now. I've had real good relationships in my life with women that I don't have now. And I've had a lot of things, and none of that matters really to me. Not that it doesn't matter to me, there are still things that I want. But despite what I might want, I really feel satisfied with the way my life is going today. I'm real happy about it. I'm sitting here at a World Convention, talking to a tape machine. I'm real happy to be here. It's my second World Convention. It's just hard to describe. Just hard to describe what's going on inside me, because this is new feelings. I'm not used to feeling at all. And the feelings I have right now, it's not like there's anything big and dramatic. It's all, it's not. I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to understand a little bit that there are no big deals. It's, whichever way it works, as long as I do my part of things, it's okay. I have a real sense of peace. That's the best way I can do it. I don't take any of this for granted. At least I try not to. Because I've had periods in my life, like I said before, where I've stayed away from drugs and then I've gone back to them. I was never really told how to do it before. One day at a time makes a big difference when I approach things that way. I've had a lot of miracles over the last 2 years, and I get the sense that I haven't run out of them yet, that there's more to come. I'm real content to see that come. I'm real happy with that. And certain things that I always wanted in my life, certain ways of feeling accepted, certain goals, certain yearnings to be a decent person, to do something that felt okay, Those yearnings are being satisfied by this program, by the way of life I'm having today. The only satisfactions I used to get was by real maximum peak type of experiences, real sensory overload type of thing. And then I had to pay the price for that. And then even those started becoming impossible to achieve. I have no doubt in my life, and in my mind, I have no doubt that I would not be alive today if it were not for this program. And I don't even have a moment's doubt. Not only am I alive, but I'm enjoying my life. My relationship with my family, which was real sick, for most of my life, is as okay as it can be today. It's all right. At least I've gotten to share a few years with my mom and dad where I have some understanding of it. I'm not pissed off all the time. I have 2 nieces that look up to me, that I spend time with. And my sister, we've always been close. But even that relationship was damaged. And that's worth a lot to me, because we're a real small family, and we're the only ones that survive. And that means a lot to me. And I've got that back. if I stop and think about it just this way, sometimes it's overwhelming. I'm real grateful for it.